Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life and just little things that I've learned as I have grown into the person that I am today. And I was sitting around today, because it's Easter, thinking a lot about my mom and just, growing up and our times together and stuff like that. And so I brought out some of her journals, and it was interesting because in one of her journals, here are a couple of her journals that I had, I found article after article after article after article about Matthew Shepard. Here, I have a picture of him. I will show you. If you don't, there he is, Matthew Shepard. And then my mother had like underlined parts of this and on and on and on. And she has all of these different articles. Gay student's death warrants intolerance of homophobia, and she has it dated, and she has parts of it outlined and underlined. And what's really interesting is that Matthew Shepard's story has a lot to do with my own coming out, and really, I guess, my mother's coming out, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. And if you guys do not know who he is, I am going to read you a part of this article called "Beating Victim Remembered as Gentle Spirit." Friends, strangers, and protesters gather in Wyoming for funeral of gay college student. And this was on Saturday, October 17th, 1998. I would have been 26 years old. So I would have been out at this point for 8 years. Casper, Wyoming. Matthew Shepard, the gay University of Wyoming student, beaten and left to die on a split rail fence, was remembered at his funeral Friday as someone who struggled to fit into a world not always kind to gentle spirits. Matt was a young man who met the world with eager expectation, who offered trust and friendship easily and lived honestly, said the Reverend Ann Kitch of Peekskill, New York, who was married to Shepard's cousin. Matt trusted in the good of God's world. And, this saying of struggle to fit into a world not always kind to gentle spirits stood out to me today when I was reading this. And so let me tell you a little bit about my story and my mother's coming out, okay? And not as her coming out with a sexuality issue, her coming out as the mother of a gay son. And I think that it's something that we don't really talk a lot about in our society, If you look on YouTube, there are hundreds and thousands, literally, of videos of, people telling their coming out stories. But there are very few stories out there or YouTube videos of parents explaining how they came out, There are organizations in the United States, and I'm sure across the world, of PFLAG, parents and friends of lesbians and gays, that, cater to parents and friends and family members of, the LGBTQIA plus community out there. And there are a lot of amazing support groups for friends and family members. And yet, we still don't really hear a lot about the stories of the parents and the family members that come out on their own. And I very much do believe that there is a coming out process for parents as well. Now, with my father, it's interesting because my father is conservative, and I mean, not completely 100% right-wing conservative. When it comes to issues, he's very, very liberal. But he is also a surgeon. And, when I came out to him, I came out on my 18th birthday. When I came out to my dad, he was like, I've known you were gay for a long time. He was like, from a very young age. And he based it on stereotypes of like me wanting to play with dolls and those kinds of things. Being a little bit more effeminate, or a lot more effeminate than the other boys. And, for him, it was a no-brainer. He said, I believe scientifically that this is something that happened to you before you were born, that you were genetically decided to, fall in love with people of the same sex. He was like, and he's never had an issue with it. My dad gave me away at my wedding. So he has been an amazing support system. When I came out to my mother, who was a beatnik hippie liberal, okay, and had many, many gay friends, I was actually more scared to come out to her. And I first said to her that day, I said, hey, there's something I need to tell you. And she said yes. And I said, I want you to know that, like, I've been really thinking about things, and I think I'm bisexual. And we used to say back in the day, bi now, gay later. And she said, okay, Peter, come on, let's just be for real. You're gay, She's like, you don't have to. And I said, okay, And I think for me, and I don't know that I think this is something that I see as much today with the younger generation, but back when I came out, I think that it was kind of like easier for us first to say that we were bisexual and then to kind of like step forward into saying that we were gay or lesbian. That's just my experience. I can only speak to my experience, but that's, I think, it seemed easier for me back then, even though I didn't believe that to be true. I knew in my heart of hearts that I was gay. And she said, I'm scared for you. And I said, what are you scared for? Now, it's important that you know that I came out in the generation of AIDS, okay? I was on the heels of the AIDS crisis happening. You know, it started in the late 70s, and I came out in 1990, that summer. And so, 87 to 90 was like the summer of people really passing away. It was the Ryan White era. It was when the quilt was going around. I mean, it was everybody had the word AIDS on their lips. And an AIDS crisis and the gay community were connected like this. And so it was like always this huge fear that you were going to become that person. And so I said to my mom, I said, what are you afraid of? That I'm going to like get AIDS? Like, I won't practice, unsafe sex practices and those kinds of things. And she goes, no, she's like, I'm not afraid of that. She's like, if that happens, we'll deal with that. She said, I'm afraid of how society is going to treat you. And she said, I have learned that society is not kind to gay people. And what was really interesting about that was I had not been out up till this point of my 18th birthday, and yet from 5-6 years old when I was in first grade, all the way up to the time that I was 18 and came out, society hadn't been very kind to me anyway. They hadn't treated me very well with this assumption that I was gay already. And they had stolen part of my story, because when I came out, then I had to admit, that they were right. And so all of these bullies and all of these people that had said gay and fag and homo and all this kind of stuff, they owned part of my story, right? And so that was a really hard part for me, was to sit there and look at my mom that was telling me that society is not kind to gay people. And I wanted to say to her, yes, I know. But I had protected my mom so much through the years. One of my biggest fears was that I would walk across the stage at graduation, and thank God this did not happen, and that my mother would be sitting there in the audience, one of her proudest moments to see her son graduate from high school, and people would shout out derogatory words. I was terrified of that. And it didn't happen, thankfully, but it happened to me on a daily basis at school, so I'm kind of surprised it didn't happen to me at graduation. But I was always very protective of my mom. And, it was a slow process for her. My first real boyfriend that I brought around her, she would call, when she introduced us to people, she would say, this is my son Peter, and this is his special friend, which I think is some corny-ass bullshit. I cannot stand the word special friend to this day. I'm like, whenever I am watching a TV show, I'm like, oh, cringe, I hate that, special friend. Like, that sounds like, like you dialed somebody up and said, can I have a special friend, please? It was so embarrassing. And I had so many conversations with her, and I would say, Mom, what is your deal? Why can you not just be cool with this? Why do you have to say special friend? He's my boyfriend, And she would say, well, she'd say, I'm okay with it, but I don't know that this person's okay with it or that person. And that is something that my mom and I very much shared, is that we were very protective of other people's emotions and responses, right? When it's really none of our business what they think about things. And so she didn't want other people to, think negatively of her, or, I think she came of the generation, even though she was liberal and beatnik, okay? I think she came of the generation that if other people thought there was something wrong with her son being gay, then they would think that she had done something wrong as a parent. And she couldn't kind of really live with that, if that makes sense. So flash forward, I had my first boyfriend, and we were together 5 years, and so that would have been when this happened. And I kind of remember, I've watched all of the movies on Matthew Shepard. I've watched the discussion occur over the years. Yes, you don't believe in the comment section below. I know that people have said the way they painted him at first is not necessarily the way that they paint him at the end. But, what's interesting to me is that I do remember when it happened. And for those of us out there, the same generation as me, the MTV generation, the real MTV generation, I remember that they rolled comments for 24 hours on MTV, just one comment after another that people could send in about Matthew Shepard and what was going on. And it was the first time in our society in the United States that hate crimes were taken seriously. That a young man had been left to die on a fence, okay, in Laramie, Wyoming, like a scarecrow. And, you know, when we look at that and we think about that, and that the people that did it had really no remorse whatsoever, and it was a shock to society. What I didn't know at the time, and I found out later, was that my mother was so profoundly impacted by it that she was calling the hospital literally every hour or two, up to the point that Matthew Shepard died, to give a message to Judy Shepard. My mother felt so completely changed by this event because she couldn't imagine this happening to me. And I think that what happened was those fears that she had on my birthday of turning 18 and coming out to her had been realized through somebody else's story. And my mother's coming out process literally happened that quick. Overnight, she became a changed person. Overnight, she became intolerant of other people's hatred towards the LGBTQIA+ community. She no longer was willing to listen to the jokes. She no longer was going to protect somebody else's emotions or feelings, and she had no problem calling my boyfriend, to family members or anybody around. She had no issue with it whatsoever, whether it was in her church, at the grocery store. She was not going to be ashamed of her son on any level anymore. But that was a process for her. These articles are testament of that process. It doesn't just happen overnight. I think sometimes we're super critical of the parent that hears the news and responds negatively at first without giving them some process, some catharsis that maybe their 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 years previous hasn't prepared them to hear that news. It doesn't mean in that moment that they don't love their child. It means they might be afraid for their child. It means they might be afraid of society. It means they don't really know where they're going because they've never walked down this road before. My mother had never walked down that road before. I don't know why it was so easy for my dad. I think to some extent he had prepared himself my entire life for this. I think he saw it from far away and he was very honest with himself and he knew someday this is probably what we're going to be dealing with Peter. But my mother, she to the day that she died would say, I don't know how people don't know that they think you're gay. I just don't see it at all. I'm like, oh my God, mother, you know? But for everybody, they have their own coming out process. I'm not real supportive of the ugliness and the nastiness that goes in to parents kicking their kids out of the house because they just can't handle the fact that their children are gay, or, you know, shunning them from the family or whatever. Okay, I never will be able to wrap my head around that and understand it. But what I can understand are small pieces of that. It's like a magic eye picture where I see a little bit of it and sooner or later it all kind of comes together. And maybe one day I'll truly be able to understand where those people are coming from. That they have fear in their heart, that there's confusion in their heart. And I think even the best parents, the most embracing, loving parents in the entire world, that from the word go out of, you know, the coming out process say, I'll love you, I don't care what, okay, behind closed doors, are having a little bit of fear inside. And, you know, I think that that's okay. I think that we have to allow our families and our friends to also have a coming out process of their own. But I think at the end of the day, we have to remember that all of our children could one day end up as scraps of newspaper articles tucked away quietly in a journal, and people aren't talking about that person anymore. And then what is the lesson learned? Would we like to just, you know, have those people out of our lives forever over one issue that isn't really that, you know, consequential to our lives? Or would we like to accept them and love them for who they are? I've always said that me being gay is just who I love. It is not who I am. But it does impact a lot of who I am. My mother having a gay son impacted a lot of who she was. My father having a gay son impacted a lot of who he was. You every day have the choice whether to embrace that or whether to push that away. But for everybody out there that's gone through it, you know, it is an experience and it is a cathartic journey that each person needs to take their own time on. And we cannot push, just like we wouldn't push somebody out of the closet of coming out, we shouldn't push parents and family members of coming out either. I hope that helps you guys. I love you, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.